So let's talk about Overwatch on the Nintendo Switch because Overwatch is finally coming to the Switch platform, and I know so many people out there have been honestly waiting for this day, and it's not too surprising because we knew at one point Overwatch was going to be dropping on the Nintendo Switch. So let's talk about the game. Before I talk about the actual game, I do want to point out something about the physical version of the game, which a lot of you may not be aware of, especially if you're a collector or you buy a lot of physical Switch games. Basically, what's going on with Overwatch, you should be seeing a picture on screen of the physical version of this game. And if you look at the physical version of this game, you will notice that there is going to be no cartridge in the box or no physical media. They're just going to be giving you a code in the box. And I know that's not great. And I know a lot of people have a right to be mad about this because why give us a stupid code in the box? It should be a physical cartridge. But I know one thing with the Switch is cartridges are expensive, but still that's no excuse to actually not give us a cartridge in the box when you have to take in consideration Blizzard is a big company, and of course they can outright pay for a Nintendo Switch cartridge. So I don't know what they're doing by just giving a code in the box. That pretty much makes the physical version of Overwatch pretty much irrelevant or pretty much useless at this point, when you're better off just downloading it on the eShop. No point of you going out to stores like GameStop, Walmart, Target, Best Buy and actually buying the physical version because it's a waste of space, it's a waste of plastic. Overall, you should not be supporting this tactic. And honestly, I'm a fan of Nintendo Switch games. I'm also a fan of just a lot of different things, and honestly, this does piss me off. And honestly, this is not right to have just a stupid code in the box. But the more I've actually been thinking about this, it really doesn't matter that there's no physical cartridge in the box. Hear me out really quickly. The one thing that kind of makes a physical version of Overwatch kind of irrelevant anyway is due to the fact that this game is a game that's not going to be supported forever. So by owning the physical version of this game, what is it really doing for you? Yes, it's nice to have a physical Overwatch little cartridge, but years down the road, this game's probably going to have its server shut down just like most online multiplayer games. So what's really the point of that? So it really doesn't matter. But I still feel your guys' pain when it comes to Overwatch, when it comes to physical media on the Switch. I just wanted to point that out there just in case you're not aware of what they're actually doing with Overwatch on the Switch and with the physical version. And then to top off everything, they are actually throwing Switch owners a bone here when it comes to this game. They're actually going to be giving us 3 months of the Nintendo Switch online service for free, and that's absolutely nutty. I don't even think another game actually did this, whether it's on this platform, whether it's on PS4 or Xbox One. I just don't think that's ever happened with a game where they gave us a lot of the online service. Sure, there's been games that given us like 2-week trials or 15-day trials, but I don't think there's been one game that's given us this many hours or this much of an online service. So that's absolutely great. We are going to be getting 3 months of the online service for free. And to top it all off as well, this game is only going to be a $40 release. So you take in the $40 release, you also take in the fact that you are getting a 3-month subscription to the Nintendo Switch online service. I'm not quite sure how they're going to be doing this. Are they going to be actually giving us a code, or when you buy it from the eShop or whatever the case may be, is it just going to be tacked on if you tacked on to your online service subscription or whatever the case may be? But either way, that's absolutely fantastic. But I just wanted to go over those before we actually start the video. So let's actually now talk about Overwatch, and let's talk about how it's going to perform on the Switch, because we do have information, and this is official information from Blizzard about how this game is going to play on the Nintendo Switch. So right off the bat, you are looking at the Nintendo Switch version of this game. All of the footage that you're seeing in this video is going to be taken from the Nintendo Direct. I don't think there's actually any direct footage from the Switch so far. I think everything that people have been looking at is so far just from the Direct. So all the footage is from the Direct, and it is the Switch version of this game. Now, when it comes to performance of this game, it's already confirmed when you play in the dock and you play on a TV, you will be able to play this game at a 900p 30 FPS. Let's talk about the resolution of this game. So the resolution of this game is going to be 900p, and honestly, if you ask me, that's not too bad. I know the Switch isn't the most powerfulest hardware out there on the market compared to the PS4, Xbox One, or a PC, of course, but to have this game running at 900p is absolutely fantastic. 900p compared to 1080p on another console is not that bad, and most likely you won't even notice the difference from 900p to 1080p, so that's very nice. If they went from like 720p to like 1080p, that would absolutely be a killer. But here we're not talking about 720p or 500p or anything. We're talking about 900p, and 900p is so close to 1080p, like it doesn't even matter. But it does suck it's not 1080p, of course. I would still take 1080p because in some areas you may still see some kind of jagginess and it won't be the clearest thing compared to other versions. But let's be honest here, when you're buying the Switch version of most third-party games, you're not actually buying the best version of games. You're buying the most watered down version of games. But you guys already know that when you come into most Switch ports, you know you're going to get some kind of gimped version of a game. And Nintendo Switch was never the best way to play third-party games unless you want to play games on the go, of course. And that's the biggest appeal of the Switch, is to play the games on the go. So take it as it is, 900p. And then for the frame rate of the game, we have 30 frames per second. And I know for a lot of people, that's going to be the biggest decision on whether you buy this game or not. And 30 frames per second, especially for a shooting game like Overwatch, is not the greatest. Now, they didn't actually clarify this. Is it going to be locked 30? I think it might be locked 30, but who really knows? Let's pray to God it is locked 30. And before you say anything about 30 frames per second, I do have to make this clear. 30 frames per second is not all that bad, taking in consideration if it's a locked 30 frames per second, then it's going to be pretty smooth. And I do play a lot of Switch third-party games, and I can't admit 30 frames per second is not garbage. Is 60 frames per second recommended? And do you want 60? Of course, I'll take 60 any day, and everyone agrees 60 frames per second is pretty much kind of the standard nowadays. Games should not be running at 30, but taking in consideration the Switch is underpowered, 30 frames per second is not too bad. As long as it's a locked 30, then we should be okay, because I played other games on Switch, like I said, that are third-party games from the CTR games, one of the most recent games, Crash Team Racing, Nitro Fueled, and that game runs at 30. And if you play that game is pretty much buttery smooth, and you can't even tell that game's running at 30 frames per second. And I'm pretty sure almost every gamer who picks that game up and plays that game on the Switch that's running 30 frames per second, you'll have a very good time with that game. But that game was a game that always played 30 frames per second across the board, no matter what platform you played that game on. But just 30 frames per second is not bad. Let's just hope, like I said again, this game does not have frame rate pacing issues, because if this game comes out and it's 30 frames per second occasionally, but then it has frame rate dips where it dips down to like 25 frames per second, 27 frames per second, 26 frames per second, then that's where we're really going to get in trouble with this port. And there's no reason why this game should be dipping all over the place. As long as it's locked 30, it's still going to be very great. It's unfortunate it's not 60 frames per second. Usually for me, when it comes to things like frame rates in game, I'm not all too mad if games aren't 60 frames per second. I would love 60 frames per second on most games, but 30 doesn't really bother me. As long as it's locked 30 and it plays close to 30 with most games, I'm okay with that, because you do have to realize last gen, almost every game I think did play at 30 frames per second on the Xbox 360 and PS3, so 30 never really bothered me. But I know to some people that will actually bother them, and honestly, the only time I really do care about frame rates as much as I do is with games that do have a big emphasis on online multiplayer action or shooting games in general, because even though I said I love 30 frames per second or don't mind 30 frames per second, I will have to be honest with you guys. Shooting games are the one genre I do typically want my games to run close to 60 frames per second, because it does make a big deal. You don't want to feel like you're moving your gun slowly. You don't want to feel like you're moving in molasses or moving in quicksand or something like that. You really want to feel like the gun's smooth, the animations are smooth. You want the smoothest experience, especially when it is an online multiplayer game. So for me, honestly, this news did kind of bother me a little bit because I was expecting this game to maybe be like 720 or 900p and then come out to be 60 frames per second or close to 60 frames per second. But lo and behold, this game does come out, or this game drops, and then the information leaks out from Blizzard themselves, and they said this game is 30 frames per second. And this kind of is killer news, and it is going to be a deal breaker for most people. Not so much the resolution, but more so the frame rate of this game. And then we do have to talk about, of course, Paladins on the Switch, because Paladins is pretty much a different version of Overwatch, and that game is running smoothly on the Switch. I think it runs at like 900 or 1080, but it runs at 60 frames per second. And for a game that's less quality than Overwatch, of course, it's not from a big budget company like Blizzard. It's from Hi-Rez Studio, and Hi-Rez Studio is a smaller company than Blizzard. But for that game to be a free-to-play game, and on top of that, it does have 60 frames per second support, is a big deal. Now, granted, of course, a lot of people are going to say, doesn't that game have less fidelity than something like an Overwatch? And that is true. When you look at the maps, when you look at the graphics and things like that, it's not as polished, and it doesn't have a lot of effects and things like that going for the game. But taking in consideration that every platform that Paladins is on, it runs at 60 frames per second, is absolutely nutty, especially the Switch version. The Switch version is one version that does play at 60 frames per second, and coming from a console which most ports do have to take some kind of sacrifice, you would think Paladins would be one game that does have to take some type of sacrifice. But lo and behold, that game doesn't have to take any sacrifices on the Switch. So why is that game running at 60, but something like an Overwatch isn't running at 60 frames per second? Is that because Overwatch is much more graphically powered? It has more things going on in the maps. It has more graphical flares. It's more of a beautiful game. It's more this and that. Is that why this game can't run at 60? Honestly, it just boggles my mind. Why is this game not running at 30 compared to 60? And if you've been playing Paladins on the Switch for quite some time, and then you transition over to something like Overwatch, you're definitely probably going to notice the difference when it comes to the actual frame rate of the game. When you play that game, you're going to feel like you're in molasses. You're going to feel like you're underwater. You're going to feel like you're in quicksand. And honestly, that's not great news. Honestly, all I can say is you probably don't want to play Paladins anytime soon if you're thinking about getting Overwatch on the Switch, just because the frame rate issue, and it may bother you. It just really depends on what type of person, if you can handle going from 60 to 30 frames per second. Me personally, I've been playing a lot of Paladins. I have about 100 hours in Paladins, and that game is buttery smooth, but I'm going to try to hold off and not play that game anytime soon until Overwatch comes out, because most likely I'm probably going to pick up Overwatch on the Nintendo Switch at the price point with the 3-month package they're giving out with this game. Overall, it does seem like it's going to be a very good deal. Even though this is going to be the worst version of Overwatch, without a doubt, we can safely say the one thing that's going to make this one of the best versions of Overwatch, of course, is the fact that you can play this on the go. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to say you can take your gaming laptop with you, or some type of laptop. That is true, and laptops are portable, but this is going to be the best way to play Overwatch portably, without a doubt, and that's no argument right there. So that's going to be very interesting, but that's going to be the biggest deal with this game, being able to take this game on the go. The nice thing about this game, when you play this undocked, I didn't even talk about undocked performance, this game is actually going to run at 720p 30 frames per second undocked. I have a feeling that the reason this game plays at 30 frames per second in the dock and outside the dock is they want to make sure the game is fair to every single player, because they don't know how each Nintendo Switch player is going to play this game. Are you going to play it on the dock, or are you going to play it in the TV? I was thinking to myself for quite some time, maybe this company could do what some other companies did with some Nintendo Switch ports. There's some Nintendo Switch ports that actually have a performance mode and a graphics mode where you can lower the resolution but get higher frame rates, or get higher frame rates but get lower resolution. And I was thinking to myself, why doesn't Overwatch just do that. Just have a toggle in the menu. But then I realized there's no point of that, and it kind of can't happen just because everybody would be on different grounds. Not everybody's gonna know that mode's a thing, and some people aren't gonna want to do it. Some people are gonna want higher resolution but lower frame rates, and some people are gonna want higher frame rates and lower resolution. And honestly, with a game like this that's heavily multiplayer focused, they really cannot do that, because if they do that, it's going to be unfair and everything's going to be unbalanced. So I think that's why they didn't have that mode in the Switch version, because also they don't know how you're going to be playing this. If you play this undocked, of course, then that graphical setting is going to be kind of useless anyway, and they can't have an unfair playing ground where somebody's playing 30, someone's playing close to 60. Honestly, it just wouldn't make sense. Honestly, for me, even though I do care about graphics a little bit, I really wish this game was more of a 720p, maybe 60 frames per second thing, because I want the smoothest thing possible. But like I said again earlier in the video, if this thing is a locked 30 and it's 900p, then we shouldn't have any problems here. Taking in consideration again, the Switch is a hybrid system. You can play this game on the go. One thing people did actually mention is the Switch never had good Wi-Fi to begin with, and I will agree with that. My Nintendo Switch doesn't even have good Wi-Fi. I normally don't hit around 3 bars of Wi-Fi, and I'm usually super close to my router and super close to my equipment, and that's absolutely insane that I'm not hitting 3 bars on the Switch. Most of the time I only hit 2 bars on the Switch, and with a game like Overwatch that's only a multiplayer online experience, it's going to be very interesting to see how well these matches actually work online with the Switch never having good Wi-Fi to begin with. And a lot of people are going to be playing undocked. They're going to be playing in handheld mode to even make things worse. I was going to say, if you're playing on the dock, the best way to play Overwatch is going to be with the Nintendo Switch Internet adapter to play this game, because you're really going to need this since the Switch never got good Wi-Fi to begin with. That's just something to take in consideration if you're thinking about buying this game and thinking about playing this game for the first time. You really need to get one of those adapters so you can have one of the most smoothest experiences with this game. This game is only a multiplayer experience only. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this video talking about Overwatch on the Switch. It looks like it's going to be somewhat a fantastic game on the Switch. Of course, all this news coming out about the performance of this game, you do have to keep your mind open about this stuff, because let's be honest, when this game comes out, anything's bound to happen. The frame rate could be an unlocked 30. It could have frame rate pacing issues. The resolution could be different. Who really knows when this game's out? Of course, nobody actually got their hands on this game yet. Everybody's only seen, I think, as far as I'm aware, only seen the Nintendo Direct footage of this game. So we'll have to wait until this game actually comes out on the market to see if this is going to be a game that's going to be very good when it comes to the performance on the Nintendo Switch. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.